Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. Welcome back to The Broken Record. I'm your host, Merkley, and I'm not very smart. So if you're prepared yourself to hear smart things, get ready to be disappointed. However, here's the thing. All right, this is what's going on. And I know I have to keep doubling down on this because I just don't hear anybody saying it the way I see it. And that's really the only time I get on here and blab is when I feel like something needs to be said. If somebody else is saying it already, I'll just direct you over there. But I don't really hear anybody saying that racism is okay. I just don't hear anybody saying that. I hear people saying it's the worst thing in the world. And I hear people saying this other race is terrible, and there's a lot of anger behind it. And there's, or there's a lot of, I don't know, there's just a lot of energy behind it every time, no matter what somebody's saying. And I've been saying this for at least a decade, but to me, racism is like farting in an elevator. It's rude, but mostly funny. And it is. It's mostly funny. It's ridiculous. It's kind of absurd. But I'm changing now that I'm moving away from radical individualism. I'm moving more into racism is just a part of existence, and it's fine. It's just part of how God made things. It's nothing to be upset about. In fact, I think the reason why the term has been so turbocharged is because of that fact. If you can take a fundamental building block of nature, of God's plan, and make it seem like it's the worst thing in the world, well, then you're always fighting. It's like saying the sun is evil. And you got people hiding from it. Don't look at it. Block it out. I don't see, I think maybe people are moving away from it a little bit. Certainly more people are laughing at being called racist terms, anti-Semitic, racist, whatever. I think more people are just letting it roll off their backs. And I'm not suggesting to adopt it as being the central focus of your life. Like when I say I'm transitioning to an ethno-nationalistic tribalist, I'm not saying that everything about my whiteness needs to be my identity. It doesn't need to become the central focus of my life. I can still play piano. I can still take care of the pigeons. I can still water the plants and take walks on the beach. And I can still say hi to people from different tribes and different races and religions. But I can simply just acknowledge that they are different. That's what I'm saying. What about that? What about just going, pigeons aren't crows? Sorry to keep beating that dead horse, but dead horses aren't dead ponies. And dead ponies aren't dead elk or ants, and ants aren't bees. We're just different, and that's what makes life miraculous. We don't all have to be the same. White people and black people, we don't need to say we're the same. We know we're not the same. Black people know we're not the same. White people know we're not the same. It's the pretending that we are. It's the trying to force white people to understand black people, or trying to force black people to understand white people, and to adopt each other's ancient genetic inclinations and to understand them. That's where we run into trouble, you know? That's where we get the resentment. That's where we get the imbalances. That's where we get the real fights, you know? And it's the close proximity, having to sit in the same school, and we have to decide what we're going to teach. Do you teach things from a black point of view? I'm only taking these two because these are extreme. There are obviously more tribes than just black and white, but let's just go with the black and white one because for whatever reason, that's the one that gets chosen. That's the comparison gets chosen most. Anyway, I looked up a bunch of stuff, you know, because it's really, a lot of people are growing impatient. Black people are growing impatient. White people are growing impatient. Everybody's growing impatient with a lot of things. There's a lot of buttons being pushed, a lot of things being manipulated, a lot of people not understanding things, and lots of vast differences in the way these two tribes understand the world and the value within the world. Okay? Like, here's an example. I looked this up. You can check my data if you want to. I researched this with a number of different AI assistant search engines and tried to cross-check, but I asked, my research was, how much does each white person in America pay through taxes and everything else for the black community? You know, how much is taken from them and given to the black community? And we went through a variety of things, you know, welfare, prisons, you know, because 1/3 of the inmates are in the prisons. That costs money. Policing, 30% of the black, 30% of all the arrests are black. Justice, 30% of the trials. Victims, how much property is taken, you know. Security, how much more do you have to pay for security cameras and bars on windows? Property, how much does your home depreciate when the certain neighborhoods get close to yours? You know, fire, there's more fires in black neighborhoods. Uninsured motorists, lots of different categories, you know, but we came up with a dollar amount for each one. And I've cross-checked all these, but in your average white person's lifetime, about $200,000 to $250,000 will be taken from you and given to that community. Meaning that for every dollar that you pay in, you get about 41% back. And you go, but how do the black people get it? Well, because and we're talking tribalism here, that's why we're going for the communities and not for individual cases. But on the reverse, if you're a black person, because you're a smaller percentage of the population, and so all that money that's being taken from white people and given to black people, over the course of an average black person's lifetime, they get a surplus. They get about $900,000, almost $1 million per black person. Food stamps, welfare, extra costs, court costs, everything else. You're distributing it across the thing. So there's a huge wealth transfer happening there, you know? And it just kind of goes on in the background. We're not signing checks. This is to black people, you know? You can look up these statistics as many ways as you want to. One of the ones you can look up is just like comparing racial groups by how much they pay in to how much they get out of the system, right? White people pay in for every dollar they pay in, they get about 44 cents back. They're the ones that are doing the most paying in America. Jews are close behind. For every dollar they pay in, they get about 54 cents back. You know, Asians are behind them, something like 60 cents. Latinos are almost even. For every dollar they pay in, they get about $1 back. So it's just like it's this distributed thing where some groups are a drag on the system. They're a drag on you. You're paying for them. And some you're not paying for. Some are paying in, you know. But so that obviously is going to create resentment, you know. Certainly there's no gratitude there on the end of black community. They're complaining. You know, you stole it. We built this country, blah, blah, blah. Of course, most of these things are lies, you know. But that's the truth. The truth is this money's being transferred from you. And that's, you know, that's $215,000 roughly that's being taken from you. And that's not just, if you imagine if you were to take that money, $215,000, and just invest it over time, you could turn that into about $4 million if you're just investing it in 7% return stocks. So that's a wealth that you're not going to have. And that's just you, one person. That's not a family. Imagine that money that's not being generated because that money's being taken from you. I mean, reparations are being paid already, whether you like it or not. You know, but how do you solve this problem? You know, how do you solve it? You can cut it right off. You can just say, no, we're not going to do it. Is that going to happen? You know, what does it look like if we're kind of looking at these SNAP benefits right now and the threats of violence and everything? And you imagine they turn off and people get hungry. And then what? You know, they don't have skills. There aren't jobs for them to take immediately. The culture is different. That's where I'm going to kind of generalize the difference between white culture and black culture. And you can look around the world to do this because where there are white people, there's white culture. It pretty much is the same, different little outfits. Swedish have their thing. Germans have their lederhosen. You know, the Nords have their thing. The Icelandic people have their little sweaters. But they all kind of look the same. They're very similar, you know, and black cultures also look similar. When you leave them on their own, their culture looks like Africa no matter where you put them, unless you intervene. You know, it ends up looking like Africa, and that's fine. I'm not making a judgment, you know. We can talk about differences in IQ and all that other kind of stuff. I'm not going to say that IQ is the only measurement that matters. I don't think it is at all. I think that I've been saying for a long time, if you can't sing and if you can't dance, I don't care what your IQ is, you're not a fully intelligent human being. A fully intelligent human being has the ability to move their arms and their legs, know where they are in space. You know, there's a certain amount of athleticism. So obviously, when you see black people, there's the cliches that everybody knows about that you can't talk about, but sports, athleticism, singing, arts, these go back to Africa and everything. And it makes sense when you look at the sunshine and you look at the African continent and you compare white people coming from the cold places that have to plan and really negotiate with their neighbors. And for the long winter, you die if you don't, you know. I look at the black community, and I've said it on recent recordings, but to me it's a hustle and muscle and maybe even a tussle sort of culture. It's built on charisma, strength, you know. Wherever you look, in the African tribes, you know, General Butt Naked, Haiti, General Barbecue, just this tough sort of thing. The arts and song and dance comes into a lot of charisma. They're charisma-based cultures, you know. Not a lot of loopholes, not a lot of laws, not a lot of, you know, analytical shit. It's just very rudimentary. I'm the boss, you know. Who's the boss around here? Just look who's on the corner. Who's the toughest guy? The toughest guy wears the fancy clothes, has the fancy car. It doesn't matter where you go. He's got the color and the flash. He's the one making the deals and conducting the hustle. I mean, and it's really evident. I've always wondered about this. When I was mad at racism, I would get mad at the differences, right? When you get angry at the differences, like, well, there, and you start becoming insulting. But like if you go to a black church, it might be a black Christian church, and you think, okay, black Christians, white Christians, they're the same because of Christianity. But not really. If you go to a black church, or if you just listen to black people talking about the hustles, about everybody's got a nephew in jail, or they've been to jail, or they got picked up for a hustle, a drug hustle, a this, that hustle, taking things off the back of the truck hustle or something. They don't see it the way white people see it. When white people talk about their crimes, there's this shame, there's this heaviness, there's this wanting to avoid the topic, But that's not the same in black community. It's not this heavy thing to have hustled, And you see this not just in black cultures, but across the world. You'll see, in some cultures it's like, well, you left your bike on the street, so we take it. And it's just not considered to be a moral infraction. Well, you left your bike on the street. Low trust. And we go, low trust, high trust. We're the high trust. We're so much better. I'm like, okay, you don't even need to do that. You can also just say they're totally different. And who knows? God created these two different cultures. Both seem like, they seem like ways. They're just ways. Am I judging the pigeons for being pigeons? Am I judging the lions for being lions? That's silly. That's a judgment and aspersion you cast in nature. You cast it on God, Again, the problem is when you try to mix the two things or pretend that there's no mixing going on. That's the real problem, is when you just don't acknowledge the differences. That's the part where you get insane. That's the part where we just go, no, the zebra and the horse are the same. The pig and the monkey are the same. They are both animals with 4 limbs, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. There is no difference. They are different. And why are they different? I'll tell you why. Because of God. Because of nature. That's why they're different. And we don't have to make them the same. And it's expensive to try to make them the same. Now, obviously, this seems like a big problem. Well, Merkley, what do? You just cut off the black people off their welfare and all that? I said, well, yeah, kind of. But it's better to just get together and negotiate. Currently, you have a lot of people talking about reparations. And while I think that the reparations have been paid, I just made a case for that, $215,000 out of your pocket over the course of your lifetime into a black guy's pocket, $1 million. That's a pretty good payoff, But I don't know. They don't see it that way. Their brains don't work that way. That's not the way God made them to understand these things. But they have suggested there's a new thing called Wakanda and reparations. And I'm suggesting that maybe we can make a Wakanda package. Because if you look this out, over the course of a lifetime, all that money being spent from whites to blacks comes out to be, I can't remember, it's written down here somewhere, but what is it? Some trillion, maybe I didn't write that part down. I don't know. It's something like 42 trillion or something. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's expensive to manage the African population in America as if it's American. In other words, American roads, American buildings, American sewers, American court systems, American, white this and white that, all these white ideas, that are not intuitive to Africans. Well, how could you say that? Well, just look at Africa. That's how I can say that. and I'm not going to feel ashamed about that. You can call me whatever you want. Send your complaints to God. Don't send them to me. I didn't make up this shit. I'm just observing and reporting. Okay? But what we could do is say, okay, here's a Wakanda project. Let's go. Let's build this Wakanda. You guys are talking about Wakanda. We'll pay it. We'll pay for it. You make a deal with an African country. They can rename their country Wakanda, and America just says, we're going to build you Wakanda. We're going to do it. You get them started. You give each African that wants to be part of Wakanda a reparations thing, and you say, well, here's the deal. Part of reparations, you become a full citizen of Wakanda. You get this payout. It's you figure out a number. I did some math, but it's been a couple weeks. But it's affordable to say $500,000, even maybe to $1 million, to go settle Wakanda. We'll get it going. But then once we get it going, but you renounce your citizenship to the United States. In other words, it's a one-time done. You get the reparations, it's done, because it's the only fair thing to do. Is like, the complaint is that you were stolen from your former land, so the only way to make that whole is to return you there and give you some money to start it. And it doesn't matter. We can argue, we can negotiate, whatever. But the bottom line is the math works out. We either pay it now or we're paying it later. You're paying it over time, forever, or you can make a clean break. And we just negotiate. We sit down and go, okay, let's start Wakanda. You're not going to get rid of all the black people. You're not going to convince all the black people to take up Wakanda, but a lot of them will. A lot of them will. And that it could be financially feasible to do it. We either pay it now, or we pay it anyway over time, and we still have the problems, the resentments, the no-go zones. I know, it's extreme. It's extreme. I think I'm probably not the first person to think of it. I didn't search around to see who else is suggesting Wakanda. I'm sure somebody is. I can't be the only one. But that's a way we could deal with it. Do I think we will deal with it that way? Probably not. Probably not. But I think that's the way to think about it. I don't think the right way to think about it is by holding everyone to the same standard. It doesn't make any sense in the world to treat different organisms the same. You would never want all the animals in the zoo to be fed the same diet, be kept in the same size of cage. There's nothing equal about treating all animals the same. There just isn't. It's cruel. It would be cruel to do that. Well, fish, I'm sorry, you have to be in the same cage as a gorilla. You don't get water because the gorilla doesn't have water. I'm sorry, dolphin. Have fun drying up. Or have fun, gorilla, drowning in the same pool as the dolphin. God made people differently. Okay? He made all organisms differently. And there are exceptions, of course, but we're not talking about the exceptions. That's what got us here. That's the problem. The problem is we made a bunch of rules for the exceptions instead of the general. Merkley, stop talking about Wakanda. It's not going to happen. I don't know. It could. It's not impossible. Borders change. Things change. It takes the right messenger to go, you want reparations. Well, here it is. Here it is. Would you, African-American citizen, like a check for $1 million and a start? We're building also, there's going to be these high sky, you build it so it looks like Dubai, You might even get sponsors, other countries to sponsor. Everybody wants in on a project. I don't know how many people want in on an African project. Who knows? It might be a tough sell, But it might not be. But if you get it going and it looks like Dubai and everybody that moves over there isn't getting this little, FEMA hut, but they're actually moving into a tall, glitzy skyscraper that appeals to black culture, whatever that is. You have some cliches in your mind. I have some in my mind. But you just let them kind of figure it out. The flashy whatever, the this, the that, the modern, no old stuff, because black people are afraid of old things, afraid of ghosts. Just a bunch of new stuff. Gym, parking garage, car, chunk of cash, a stake in their new community. Maybe that's what it takes. Wakanda doesn't have to have the same constitution as America. They can have their own rules. If they want it to be communist, if they want it to be equal stakes, whatever. They can figure it out. Let them figure out the dream. We say we'll back it because we have this problem of we're already paying for you and you don't like it. You hate us for it. So let's have a divorce. We can still be friends. We can still share music. We can still have visas. You can come here and visit whenever you want to, and you'll be kicked out if you overstay. And if you do visas in your country, same kind of thing. You probably won't because that doesn't seem like the kind of thing that appeals to those kinds of countries. You might not be the bookkeepers, but run things the way you want to run it. And however it turns out, that's how it turns out. No judgments. It's fine. I'm not judging Africa. I don't think there's anything wrong with living in a mud hut. Sometimes I look at it and I go, that might be a better way to live. I don't necessarily want to live under the rule of a warlord, but maybe I'm kind of already dealing with bullshit anyway. Could it be that much worse? And that's if I was a black guy, maybe it would be even less bad. You can't see it from another person's point of view. Anyway, I know these ideas aren't going to be super popular, but anyway, the point I wanted to make is that the first thing we need to get rid of is the idea that racism is bad. It's not bad. It is God. It is nature. Nature is speciesist, racist, sizist, whatever. It's just nature has a lot of rules. And if we're going to insult nature or disrespect nature, that's on us. That's not good, I don't think. I think the best way is to go with nature, not work against it, but go with it, And, I think a lot of black people would get upset at this because part of this grift, getting this $900,000 over the course of their lifetime, I think they know about it. And that's the hustle. It's the hustle muscle. You see it anytime you go around. If you communicate with black people online, if you say the N-word, to trigger a black person, they will come in with, say that in my neighborhood. That's what I mean. Okay, so in your culture, if you say a word, you get a beat down. That's not the way we do it here. In our culture, you can say whatever you want. And we control our violence until somebody makes a threat. Not because they say a bad word that hurts our feelings. But that's fine. You guys can do that. You go over and have your community where you make a list of unsayable words and you can cut white people out. I don't have any problem with a Wakanda that doesn't let white people in, or makes it hard to get in. I probably won't visit because I'm not interested in going to Africa anyway. But I'll check out your records if you want to make some TV shows, I don't know what kind of snacks you would make, But I might try them. I haven't purchased any of the black clothes. I never wore for us. I never wore any FUBU clothes or crisscross. What was it? Cross colors. Never wore any. You know. But anyway, we can trade separately. Now, that's the extreme version, right? But when you start thinking of this, now let's go to the less extreme version. I like this extreme version. I think it's extremely great to appreciate nature, to honor nature. I think that's the smartest way. I think it honors God the most by doing things this way, letting God's tribes and God's creatures and God's species, and let the pigeons be pigeons, let the goats be goats, let the pigs be pigs, let the zebras be zebras, let the black people be black people, let the white people be white people, let the Latino people be Latino, let the Asian people be Asian, let the Chinese be Chinese, the Japanese be Japanese. Let everybody be what their genes are telling them to be. And that's the point I'm making. It is my strong suspicion, it is what I have observed in my life, that people's genes are telling them how to conduct themselves. It's not the books. It's not the TV shows. That culture springs from within you, your DNA. God created you a certain way, and your society that you build comes from that. This is what I'm learning, just with my little research into Norse paganism, predated Christianity. I heard the tales. They sound like tales, but the underlying messages are the kind of messages that resonate with me. Courage versus cowardice. It's not what you learn in Christianity, but it's what white people talked about in ancient days, before Christianity, before the Jews invented Christianity, And guess what? The Navajos there have their traditions that go way back. And it's really weird because when you start asking around and you start seeing some overlap. You start seeing the Siberian, the Norse people feel this way. The Finns, although they had different language and a different set of gods, they are very similar. The Finns were more spiritual, wind and all that other stuff, magic, fairies, but not far from the Norse paganism. But they kind of more connect with the Siberian stuff, and the Siberian stuff goes to Eskimos, the Inuits, and the Inuits kind of trickle down into Navajo. And you see the traditions. But again, the point is, the traditions come from the genes. They come from God. They come from nature. Pigeons are pigeons because God made pigeons be pigeons. Sheep are sheep because God made sheep to be sheep. The way they act is because of their wool, their eyeballs. God did that. Why are we fighting it? Why would we try to pretend that a sheep is a horse? Why? It's just nonsensical. It's dare I say, I don't know. It's not good. I don't even want to use the term satanic because that borrows too heavily from Christian. But in almost all of these religions, there is a thing where it's just like, the gods made things this way. Don't fight it. If you fight the gods, you're going to probably lose. You'll probably lose if you fight the gods. And I think we've been fighting the gods too long on this philosophical, ideological issue of race. We've been, for whatever reason, whoever invented the idealism, I don't know if they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart or if they're doing it as a way to control the other tribes and destroy them. I have my suspicions, But regardless, the solution to me is to acknowledge the differences. And I know this sounds super leftist. I've been fighting leftists on this. I've been fighting for radical individualism my whole life, so this is a big departure for me because I've been demanding, no, everybody's the same. We're all the same. Go on merit. It's all who you are. I was watching Tucker and what's her name from Young Turks? Anna Kasparian. Is that her name? And they're still there clinging to this idea that racism is the worst. Racism is the worst. And it's partly because they're being accused of racism, and so they need to, virtue signal. I'm not racist. I don't think the racism is the worst thing in the possible world. And I think as long as we're stuck in that trick, whoever pulled that trick, I don't know who it is, whatever God pulled it, whatever demon pulled it, whatever tribe pulled it, to convince us that racism is our biggest enemy. I think that's the big trick. That's the problem. Because we're not going with nature. We're not honoring God by saying we're different. And I think we could probably solve a lot of this stuff within our borders. One might argue that at certain points, it has been like that. I mean, certainly, if you just look at it, we're already separated. The black neighborhood's the black neighborhood. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows where Chinatown. Everybody knows where Japantown is. There's a couple communities where they're more mixed, but street by street, it's just been that way. It's just always been that way. It's still that way. I know where all the Filipinos live, in the Bay Area. People want to be around their own kind. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. It's fine. And it will work better if we were just upfront about it and honest about it. And we just said, hey, because America's a big place and we don't want to carve it up. And I don't want to be a new state and whatever. It's just like, okay, we're kind of already carved up, And if we just realize we're dealing with different tribes, maybe we can make treaties. But we're not going to be able to solve it if we're just pretending it's not a thing. And I can hear you clinging to the idea that we are the same. I'm clinging. I'm having a hard time even saying this because it goes against everything that I've stood for my whole life. But I'm telling you, once you open your eyes to it, you can start to see solutions. Because this whole solution that we've been saying, no, merit only. No, merit only. It's all merit. Merit according to who? We don't have to integrate. We don't have to force it. And that's what these quotas, that's what DEI is about. That's what hiring practices. It's all this fiction about pretending we're all the same, that we all have the same talents. It's like, imagine if we said, no, there has to be some X number of white people on every basketball team. Sure, basketball still might be fun, but we want to see the people who jump the highest. There's no problem watching a tribe dominate something that they're good at. I don't have any problem with that. I don't have any problem. I do. I wish I was super, super handsome and huge and built, but I'm not. I get over it. You might wish that you had the qualities of a different tribe, and maybe if you work really hard, you can sort of adopt them or emulate them. That's fine. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. But you don't have to be angry about it, and you can certainly be happy about it, and you can enjoy it. You can say, this tribe is different than this tribe. We are different. High five. No problem. Would you like a taco? This tribe makes fantastic tacos. I don't know. That's just kind of me spitballing shit. All right? But yeah, that's my message, is that instead of eracism, how about embracism? Look at that, what I just came up with. In the 90s, it was eracism. Erase racism. How about embracism? I like it. Sounds pretty good. Embracism. It can be utopia. It can be. We can make the world can be a giant zoo. It already was. It already was. That's the way God made it. You guys go over here. You guys go over here. You guys go over here. Thomas Jefferson, I told you this in a different recording. Thomas Jefferson had this idea. He was against slavery. He was against it, because mostly he didn't want to bring Africans into America. He thought that's not right. They don't belong here. They're like that. We're like this. Our systems don't mix. Oh, what an offensive thing to say. It's just fucking true. We're not the same. So he was against it. But the states, the colonies voted against him, and slavery happened. So he bought a bunch of slaves, and he said, I'm going to save these guys. And, at least if they're my slaves, they will be treated better than if they're somebody else's slaves. He had kids with some of them, blah, blah, blah. He had super ideals, but he wanted slavery to end. When slavery ended, he thought, we got to send them back to Africa. The only right thing to do is send them back to Africa, because they won't mix well with our society. They're not the same, And other people disagreed. The abolitionists disagreed, and some of the freed slaves just immediately became destitute and poverty-stricken, and they were taken advantage of anyway, and new little contracts were written up that there's just a new form of slavery, with contracts and wages, and life was still tough. And he still wanted to repatriate them back to their homeland because he thought that was the least cruel thing to do, And if you look at it like, oh, well, white people are superior to black people, that it seems like shitty. But when you simply say, no, it's not superior, it's just different. Different societies work in a different way. And we can be jealous of other races if we want to. I can sit around and be envious of the physiques, the athleticism, the musicality. I can be jealous of all that stuff, and I am kind of. But I'm not going to let it control me. I'm not going to take it out on them, and they shouldn't take it out on us. Or us, I shouldn't even say us, just on another tribe. You shouldn't just go, oh, we don't like the way you do it, And you're going to have wars, and you're going to have problems, and you're always going to have to work shit out, But I think it's easier to work shit out when you're honest. Anyway, that's enough of that. I think you get the picture. Embracism. Because God made everyone different. And we should be grateful for that. Not resentful, not angry. We shouldn't fight God. Because God is going to win anyway. Thanks for listening. Unnecessary outro song to totally waste